motion to reconvene in our open meeting? Is there a second? It's been moved and second to reconvene in open meeting. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The next order of business is the certification of the closed meeting. The Lynchburg City School Board certifies that in the closed meeting just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in a closed meeting and lawfully permitted to be so discussed under the provision of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion. We need to have a roll call vote. Do I do a motion first? Is there a motion to certify? Is there a second?
Second.
All right, with that, we will do a roll call vote. Dr. Gutta?
Yes.
Ms. Mason? Dr.
Yes.
Millis? Yes. Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, the next is public comments, and we don't have any tonight, so we will move past public comments into a special presentation. We have with us tonight some members from the Special Education Advisory Committee, and they are going to present the 2018-19 recommendations. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Ms. Morrison, board members, Dr. Edwards, I'm pleased as your Special Education Advisory Committee rep, okay, who sits as a consultant for your advisory committee to present Dr. Holly Gould. Holly's going to make the formal presentation. She's going to introduce her advisory committee colleagues, and I'm going to sit down.
School board members, Dr. Edwards, on behalf of the LCS Special Education Advisory Committee, I'm here to present the SEAC recommendations for your consideration. As you are aware, the Special Education Advisory Committee is responsible to advise you on any needs specific to students with disabilities enrolled in Lynchburg City Schools. Your advisory committee meets a minimum of 4 times a year, and the public is invited to attend any SEAC meetings. During the spring of the 2017-2018 school year and continuing into the 2018-2019 school year, SEAC members reviewed needs, offered a disability awareness night at Lincoln Middle School, interacted with special education teachers, and secured input from the Lynchburg community. The SEAC prepared the recommendations listed in your board packet. We ask that you consider the recommendations as you work through the upcoming budget process and development of the LCS strategic plan. Before I close, I would like to recognize the SEAC members present this evening. We have Kate Hazelwood from R.S. Payne. She's currently the teacher for the pilot autism program there. And we have Robbie Adams, who's a parent from Heritage Elementary. Mr. Vanderwerker, the rest of the SEAC committee members, and I will be glad to answer any questions you may have specific to the recommendations.
Do you have any budget associated or dollar amount associated or required for these recommendations?
So what we're working on is the strategic plan and making sure that the special education needs as identified under these recommendations, for example, under professional development, to make sure that those things are recommended to Dr. Edwards for inclusion in the strategic plan. Yes, we do have funding in the current budget, but when we plan for next school year with professional development, we hope that there'll be additional, not additional funds, but funds that we'll be able to redirect from our current PD focus to some of these other items that we're going to be working on next year. Okay. We're trying to make absolutely certain that we don't grow what's called maintenance of effort in special education, because once you exceed maintenance of effort, you as a board always have to spend that exact amount. And we're being very, very, very cautious about expenditures in light of budget. But we're feeling really good about the professional development. I'll give you an example. The advisory committee brought to the attention of the need to provide more detailed autism-specific training for transportation department, and it was one of those thrilling moments where you're able to say as a special ed director, by the way, already talked to Dr. Copeland, and the transportation department has already set up those trainings and they've already started. So Some of the things that you have in the SEAC recommendations are items we're already working on.
Mr. Mayor, you were nice enough to meet with me recently and challenged me to look up what a registered behavioral technician is, which I did through Google. But would you mind, could someone explain to us how that would, what the role of that would be as for your new guidelines? You have a suggestion that we have more registered behavioral technicians.
Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about RBT?
Why wouldn't I? So an RBT would be...
Here, come on over here so they can see it. Here it is.
This is very uncomfortable. An RBT, for short, is an individual that's gone through specific training in order to meet the data needs specifically. Working with students of any kind, we need to have specific data that's relevant to what the goal is. And so those people would also be observed and supported by a board-certified behavior analysis. And those are through any kind of practice they're doing. It's through ethical standards and also research-based standards.
Great.
Does that answer the question?
Thank you very much.
Well, I had some questions, but they've already been answered. They were mostly about on the budget and whether there is, these are additions or is this just sort of refocusing existing efforts? It sounds like it's really emphasizing some of the new things. Yeah.
Our overall goal is to try to implement recommendations within the budget that currently exists. Now, there is an item that the advisory committee included, which is basically a decentralization of middle schools. We refer to our division-wide programs as such, division-wide programs. And right now, children with more comprehensive disabilities that really need self-contained programming pretty much most of the day, that group of students is attending Sandusky Middle. The advisory committee has for a couple of years recommended that we continue to review that. So that would be an expenditure analysis that I'll be doing after this evening. We'll be reporting that information to Dr. Edwards.
Yes, Dr. Beacon.
I want to thank for your service, especially Dr. Gould. I know your plate is full, and thank you for taking this on top of what you already have.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is for information. Yes.
So thank you guys for being here, and more importantly, I don't know if you know that they are the role models right now for the advisory committees in terms of bringing things to the board that, and I reviewed your recommendations, that would be rolled up and considered as part of our strategic plan. So this is the way that we envision this, working with community input. So I just want to thank you for all the hours that you've put in to developing these recommendations, and rest assured that we are taking it very serious as we move forward with the strategic plan.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do for our kids.
Skipped the pledge. I went right to the agenda, so let's stand now for the Pledge of Allegiance. I knew it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I even had it written. All right, that moves us to E, the finance report. Mr. Beckles.
Good evening. You have before you the financial report for the 5 months ended November 30th, 2018. As far as revenue is concerned, everything is on schedule. No issues or significant variance I need to bring to your attention. You really wouldn't see the bulk of our revenue, particularly from the state side, not showing up until January on. So beginning with my January report, you'll get the revised, what I call the revised forecast for our revenue as things change going forward. But for the first 6 months, you're not going to see any significant changes. Or if there was changes in the state's projected tax revenue, then we would get an adjustment to say, hey, by the way, sales tax is down, there might be some changes in your funding. That's not occurring. So as far as the revenue is concerned, there's no issues I need to bring to your attention there. On the expense side, again, there's no issues there, but I would like to just point out, just for your reference, you'll notice an instruction in the support students, you see a negative balance and available balance. You see one in support, 1,400. You'll see one in maintenance, and you're going to see one in IT. they are not over budget. It's a timing issue, fault on our behalf. We had the expense in November, and the encumbrance didn't get revoiced until December, but that's all cleared up now. So just wanted to point out why you see that negative there. It's already taken care of, no issue as far as that is concerned. You have already received in your financial package the copy of the CAFA that includes our audited financial statements. The CAFA is the city's financial statements that are included in. You would have gotten a copy of that. You would also gotten a copy of the audit report on the student activity account, and then the audit letter from the auditors you would see there. Student activity accounts are the accounts that are maintained at the schools. Basically, you see they got a clean audit, and just one or two issues per school, but nothing significant at all. There's been significant improvement in the way the student activity accounts are maintained at the school, largely attributed to the fact when we put in the bookkeepers for the elementary schools. So that's made a significant difference in the improvement of the financial side of it. Also, I'd like to let you know that medical claims still yet to date is running below budget. So that part is, we're still be healthier now than we was before, at least up to this point. And that's good. From that perspective, it's still going good.
How much below budget?
We're about $1.5 million at this point. Now, I'll keep my fingers crossed that if we continue that on to the end of the year, we're good to go. But as you know, with medical expenses, you just don't know. But up to this first part, we're good. Now, just before someone think, well, why don't we reduce the budget? If you remember, about 2 years ago, we did that. We took $1.5 million out of it. And what happened the year after? We got slammed. So it's one of those things, which way is good? You do the best you can with the information you have at the time. So someone is thinking about that idea, you could do that. I won't recommend that, but it's a possibility. But right now, we're good to go.
You know, we'll be developing budget for the next year. Would you share the process and the timeline, if just brief?
For the budget as a whole?
For the next, we'll be now looking towards developing the new budget for the next year.
If you remember, one of the big things that we did was to do the salary schedules. And we decided that, well, the board has decided that that would be the amount that we're gonna, and that was $2.4 million. Right now, we know what we have the preliminary estimate from the governor's budget. That won't be finalized until this general session is finished. So the timeline to finish it would not be before the governor's budget is final, because that's when we would know. Right now, we're still working on estimates. So assuming everything remains as it is, basically the only adjustment we had agreed to do was the $2.4 million. And right now, I think we only got $1 million more from the state. So if you're looking for getting additional money, we are short, which we'll have to make that up in reallocations of our existing budget. So that time frame is going to be dependent on the approval of the governor's budget. Then we could basically say after that, now that we know how much we have, so there can be very few things added to the budget. Now we could rearrange within, but there can be very few things added to because we have limited monies.
If I could expand just on your question, because you said about the process. So one of the things that we're doing right now, given that the biggest part of our budget is personnel, is we have meetings scheduled next week into the end of January with every principal to sit down and go over staffing, personnel, regardless of whether they're funded by our operating budget or grant budget, just to make sure that we're accounting for everybody and that we're meeting student needs. So that is occurring right now. We're going to move to program directors after we finish with the building staff, just to make sure. While that's occurring, and that's a meeting with central leadership and the building principals, the building principals are also meeting with their staff and have a meeting with the supervisors to assist to talk about their needs. So, and they're in various stages of what do you need for your classroom for your kids? What are some anticipated things that either that we need to replace, replenish? So that's happening at a building level. So at various levels, we have different parts of the budget process going on, so that when we do get the final numbers, we'll be pretty solid on our end.
Dr. Nillis, did you have a question?
So going forward, you mentioned salary schedules, so people to know it's contingent on getting at least the funding we have. If the funding is cut, then
Well, that's a different ballgame.
right, that will be a completely different ballgame.
Yes, that's why I'm kind of emphasizing. And let me just say it. Right now, the governor's budget have an additional 2% from this previous, which was 3%. So now it's 5%. We have one calculation if it's 5%. We have another calculation if it's 3%. Which one of them is going to be, we don't know. Right now, I'm working on I'm billing the budget. All my numbers are based on the 3%. So if it is 5%, that's more money. So that changes things. Based on what we're hearing, we don't know where to land. So they're the contingencies. So you're right. Depending on which way the ball bounces, what number we have to work with, and then we'll come back to the board and say, here's what the governor's going to get, here's what we propose to do, here's either a difference or a surplus. What do you prefer us to do? So yeah, there's a number of things up in the air.
If they pass a budget with an additional 2%, that would be an additional matching from the school system.
The 1% matching equals about a little more than 300,000.
For 1%.
Right, because when we had 3%, they were giving us 900,000.
Right.
So now they're giving us 1.5 for the 5%. So someplace in there, depending on which one of those percentages they line at, 3, the government proposed 4, it may end up proposed 5, it may end up at 4. But we have both numbers. We have the 3% and the 5. So whichever one they come down with, we know what our number is.
City funding is other one, right? There needs to be at least level funding going forward.
Yes, at this point we're requesting level funding.
Because otherwise,
again, all of our numbers are based on, our numbers are based on level funding. If that number changes,
everything will change.
Something has to change, because at the end of the day, the number have to balance. So there's where we start. So those are some of the uncertainties at this point that we don't know, why it makes it difficult to finalize the budget, because there's still a number of things that are up in the air.
And I think that's important to emphasize, that when we developed this budget, which we have been working on since the summer, that it really was based on receiving the 3% SLQ funded. We would come up with the additional funding for non-SLQ positions, and it was based on asking City Council for level funding, and assuming we got at least what we received from the state last year. And kudos to the board and to my staff for really having all that worked out by December, before we got the announcement about 5%. So the 5% does change, and it's important for the community to understand that it's not 5% and we're getting 5% for everyone. We're getting 5% for SLQ funded positions, and we would have to come up with the additional funds for the remaining staff, which is the contingency on the contingency that we're working on right now. So.
I just have one final
Yes.
comment. Thank you very much. It's an excellent auditor's report. So it's hard work, which shows up, you and your all staff. So
Thank you. It's all due to the staff.
thank you.
Dr. Coleman?
Yeah, I would just like to thank you, Madam Chair, and the superintendent, and all of the board members for that matter. This year, more than any year in the past, I believe that our capacity to understand this process and to be engaged in it has gone to another level. And we thank you, Mr. Beckles, for your openness always to entertain questions and thoughts. But I just want to say that I'm really proud of the fact of the engagement on the board side and the cooperation of the superintendent and staff in this process.
Dr. Brennan?
I'd just like to tag on Dr. Gupta's comment, and if this should be later in the agenda, please let me know. But at the last Finance Committee meeting, it was a little unclear what our schedule was going to be. I know we have a schedule on our agenda, but I think what Dr. Gupta is saying, what I would support is that the board would like to stay in the conversation of developing the budget, and one way for that to happen is for the Finance Committee to continue to meet. We met monthly, and now we're not going to go till March to meet again, thinking that, I think the administration was thinking that was most of the conversation had to be there. But I would like to suggest that the Finance Committee keeps meeting to discuss the budget as it evolves.
As we discussed in the Finance Committee meeting, and there was some sort of an agreement, is that we should start, instead of asking how much you can spend, is what you need. It's like a sort of a zero-based budgeting type model.
Well, that's Dr. Edwards.
That's what Dr. Edwards
did.
also supported.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's going on.
right now.
That's
So-
correct right now.
So, but I think what we are in agreement is if the Finance Committee is involved, so we will not be getting a cooked cake. We'll be involved in making the recipe and going along with it. So, as the process is moving along,
We'll look at the calendar and talk with Dr. Edwards, and we will get something out about what we can possibly do.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. Thank you. Next, we move to the consent agenda, and we need a motion to approve the consent agenda that includes the school board meeting minutes, December 4th regular meeting, December 6th student discipline committee meeting, January 8th student discipline committee meeting, the amended personnel report, and religious exemption.
The adoption of the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. And now it is my privilege to turn the floor over to Dr. Edwards to make a special announcement.
Yes, thank you. And we are happy to report that we are recommending and have approved a new director of transportation. Our new director, his name is Angel Garcia Ablanque, comes from Arlington County Public Schools. He is a director of transportation there. Also has experience as an assistant director from Montgomery County. And we are very fortunate to bring him on staff. One of the things that impressed us most is he is really focused on culture and climate, has worked in the secondary education position, has worked directly with children, so we think he gets it with regard to our kids and their needs. He understood fully that the first face that our children see in the morning is often the bus driver, and the last face they see before they enter their homes is often the bus driver and bus assistant, and how important that position is and how those people can make or break a child's day or set it off for the evening. Also very exciting in his repertoire was he was able to reduce the bus driver shortage from a 10% shortage to a 3% shortage. And we all know across the country there's a bus driver shortage, so we're looking forward to that. And then finally, one of the things that stood out in his resume is his work on equity and excellence, which is just another added bonus given the work that we're doing in our division on equity across the board. And I can't wait to just get him all absorbed in equity habits here in Lynchburg City Schools. So I'm really proud and pleased to recommend him as our transportation director.
We'll look forward to welcoming him. And he starts when?
February 1st.
So hope we get to meet him soon. All right, that leads us to student representatives comments. I see that Heritage High School is represented here. Ms. Felder, you want to tell us what's going on at Heritage High School?
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
Not much. Yeah, not much went on at Heritage, you know?
Not yesterday, anyway.
Yeah, not yesterday. Not much happened. Is it working? Wait. This one, right? It's not working. Okay. Well, our concert band, choir, and orchestra performed in a winter concert. We were able to allow some of the string students from Sandusky Middle to come over and play. That was really good. I know that my brother was able to play with the high school orchestra, so he was really excited about that. And we also had a guest speaker, Monica Kabler. She spoke to young female athletes about sports after high school and what college recruiters may look into if they're interested in them. Many of the track team females, they were really excited to ask her questions, and many of them benefited from that experience. She spoke with a lot of females in the school, not just athletes. She spoke with a lot of people, And from what I've heard, everybody loved her. I got to hear her speak. She was very inspiring. It made me rethink doing sports in college, but I was like, not for me, but she made me think about it again. Our wrestling team, Spencer Goolsby, Latrell Davison, and Gavin Womack placed in the Big Orange Wrestling Classic at William Byrd High School. Gavin Womack is a freshman. He is very strong. He was on the football team. He is a very good student, and he will go far. Spencer Goolsby placed third in the state last year, and Latrell went far, and we are expecting good things from these guys this year. Okay, so I have to warn you guys. It's a little bit of football ahead for like the next 5 slides. We won the state championship. Yeah. Yeah, that game was a lot. I had to be down there with Bradley, pulled him off the field a couple times, got trampled. It was great. It was a good time. Didn't get cold until the 4th quarter. That was great. They started singing on the bus on the way back to the school. It was hilarious. And these are more pictures. The score was 20-24 Heritage. Like I said, the guys were really excited. They loved the fact that the stands were full, and they were really, really excited. Bradley was ecstatic. Mr. Beatty tackled Coach Torrance. It was hilarious. This is the second time Heritage has won, this is the first time in 12 years Heritage has won the state. These are more pictures from that day. Our quarterback, Jabari Blake, received both Player of the Year awards from WSLS and WSCT. And 4 of our guys got to participate in the All-Star game with Coach Bradley coaching. We had Hassani Rivera, Vontae Pinnell, Chris Meganson, and Jabari Blake. They got to compete in the VHSCA All-Star game. And then the second game of the season, Bradley told the guys that if they won the state championship, that he would shave his head. So in our morning announcements, everybody went, 5 of the guys went downstairs. We were laughing. He was laughing. He brought out the stuff, and they shaved his head. It was hilarious. After that, I cleaned it up and skimmed him bald. Now he's hanging on to that little piece of hair, praying that it comes back. And we also got honored by the mayor. She congratulated the guys for winning the state championship game. And the guys also need your help. They really want their rings, and we are trying to raise money to get them. We have a GoFundMe page, and we also have sweatshirts on sale at the school. All you gotta do is come to the front office, ask for a sweatshirt, and they're $35. But yeah, we are raising money so the guys can get their rings and memory stuff, maybe book bags, sweatshirts, stuff like that, so the guys can get what they deserve and get what they work so hard for. But yeah, and the sweatshirts are really comfortable and really soft on the inside. I love it. But I think that's it. But yeah, nothing much happened at Heritage, you know?
Thank you. We're very proud of the guys in the football program, and we're looking forward to having them down here so that we can do some recognition as well. And I'm not sure why we don't have an EC Glass rep here. Did she change? I thought Maggie was going to do it for the first half, and someone else was going to do it for the second half. So maybe we can follow up. Right. Dr. Coleman.
Madam Chair, just for the record, I would like, coming from you or the superintendent, in 2019, I would like to, in addition to hearing the incredible reports that we get from both schools, more reflection on students' concerns relative to policies, procedures, or other type of insightful things of that nature that could inform the board and be passed along appropriately wherever it needs to be. We have incredible young people, and I want them to expand themselves even into getting involved in that discussion. I know from time to time the chair will ask for student input, but I think that should be more regular and routine. And then also, I had already made comment to the chair, and a great explanation was given to me about what we can do to be supportive of the students getting those rings. and certainly I want to do whatever my little part could be.
What's your goal for fundraising?
Our goal on the GoFundMe page is $20,000 because the rings are being custom made and they're being sent in by Herff Jones, and we did already get a big discount from Herff Jones. And we're also having I took my mic off, I'm sorry. We're also having a sponsorship dinner at Phase 2, I think next week. You have to call the school about that, kind of forgot. But I think it's next week. You come in, it's $30 a plate. You can come in, enjoy a good time. You can eat, you can laugh and talk with your friends. You can also sponsor a table or sponsor a sign. And Phase 2 will honor that almost, I think, every week or something.
Any other comments? Thank you very much. Appreciate your being here. Okay. The next is the school board committee report. We had a finance committee meeting in December. Sharon is not here to report on it. Do any of the other members have anything to report? We've mentioned some of the items in the, yes.
Just to report that at the last meeting we brought up the issue about the STEM budget, and that was discussed at the finance committee, which was appreciated. This is talking about the STEM Academy request for looking at their budget and their costs, and I've asked them to get in touch with the administration, discuss that, and the meeting that Sharon was going to do in January, now be changed to February. So it's going to be the next meeting for the academy is February the 12th.
Okay. There was a governor's school committee meeting.
I think we reported on the last meeting.
All right. Advisory committees. We had General Career Technical Advisory Committee.
Career and Tech did meet, and I don't know if Ed's here to give a report. They had to reschedule. Okay, all right, thank you. And Equity Task Force Health Advisory are meeting tomorrow, and Special Ed Advisory did their own meeting tonight. So.
Questions, comments? Dr. Coleman?
Madam Chair, could the superintendent inform us one more time, and probably just me because I need to be reminded, what is the policy on board members attending any of these committee meetings if they so choose to attend?
We did have a board member come to the Equity Task Force meeting, the last one that we had. It's a public meeting, so.
Okay.
Just
Thank you.
remember, you're not representing
You're
the
not
full,
representing
full board.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions about that? Okay. Next, we move to unfinished business, and we were going to start with the fund balance recommendation for 2017-18, and Mr. Beckles, I think you and Dr. Edwards were going to.
Okay, so previously the board had approved the recommendation for fund balance usage, which is that top column on our agenda. And then on January 2nd, I had an opportunity to meet with the city manager and her staff just to go over the recommendation. The recommendation had not gone to council yet, but to review the recommendation. And one of the requests that came out of that meeting was to kind of follow our lead. We had already previously recommended that $400,000 be set aside from fund balance for an FY 2020 project, CIP project, which is doing the replacement of the RS Payne roof. The city manager's office had asked us if we would consider in addition to the $400,000 that we had already put in our request, an additional $500,000, making that total $900,000 to go towards another one of our FY 2020 CIP projects. And since the roofing project, we had several CIP projects, chillers and replacement HVAC, but the roofing projects were our #1 priority. So the request is that we decrease our health insurance reserve by $500,000 and take that $500,000 and allocate it to another CIP project, which Dr. Copeland and I looking at our priorities, looked at the Heritage Elementary roof, even though that project was about $720,000, but taking $500,000 there. And we had a very lengthy conversation the last time about the health insurance reserve and why we wanted to raise it a little bit to 1.8 million when we were talking the last time. That concern is still there. So one of the reasons for having this discussion is to just really, for the board to be aware of, 1.3 is still a good health insurance reserve, but as Mr. Beckel said earlier, one big hit is one big hit. So it's something that we wanted to share with you. It was a request that we had from city manager's office. What this will allow the city to do is for those projects that they have slated funding for us, and if I just take these two, the RS Payne roof and the part of the Heritage roof, that would be less money that the city would have to give us in the form of CIP, which would help the city out with some of the current issues. I'm sure we're all aware of, what's going on with College Lake Dam. And that would be us doing our part in terms of trying to work together as a team, but also using the fund balance to reinvest in LCS and fix our own roofs. So it's worth a discussion, at least, so we brought it to your attention for discussion.
Questions? Dr. Gupta?
It's a great idea because, as you said, we all are in together, city and the school system, so we cannot separate one from the other. If one needs it, and we have some flexibility.
Dr. Nellis?
So what's the intent with trying to fund the rest of the Heritage project costs?
So in meetings with the Deputy City Manager last week, all of our remaining CIP costs, so the additional $220,000 for Heritage as well as our HVAC projects, would still be in the city's request, and he is hopeful that the city can fund all of the needs that we have at this time.
Okay. I was going to say, I remember a few years ago when we had a fairly relatively healthy health insurance reserve, and some unfortunate circumstances arose and it got depleted very quickly.
Dr. Coleman?
So. I think the key to all of this is effort, as the superintendent just said. And the city has local effort, and then the school division has local effort. And so I think that this takes us a long way down the road in future endeavors to develop this type of partnership. And it's logical to me, and I support it.
Dr. Gupta?
They're letting us use 500,000 or 400,000 out of that fund. We are $1.5 million below our usage on health insurance right now. We have significant deferred maintenance. Is this a point we can negotiate and get more from health reserve into getting taken care of many of our maintenance needs? You know where I'm heading.
You can. Yes, you can do that. You can. But let me go back. We were trying to get, based on our research around what's best practices, if you can know a health reserve, it's around 25% of your expenditure. That was the goal that we were going on. If you feel that goal is too high, we can reduce it. Now, unfortunately, when we had the last hit, that was about 25%, which wiped out the reserve. So that was the idea behind getting the reserves to about 25%. In the event we get a hit, we got the reserve, we could go on, life is fine. Your question is, can we reduce how much we put in the reserve and divert it to someplace else? Yes, we can do that. But just remember, once you do that and you get hit, my view is, it's better to get hit and have some change left than to get hit and be short. So yes, we could do that. I mean, there's nothing saying we couldn't.
The reason is, once you put it in the reserve, you cannot move it to maintenance fund later on, right? It's just done.
You can always move it back out.
You can?
It's not tied up forever. It just takes the board to.
Well,
so, Dr. Gupta, we currently have how much money in the health reserve?
Right now, if we reduce it with the 1.3, we'll have $2 million.
So we're at $2 million. That's 20%. We know the 2.5. It would be we're Mr. Beckles is recommending we get to. I think this strikes a balance right now with the available funds that we have. We have a good cushion in our health reserve, and we are contributing a little bit more to our deferred maintenance. I can always spend millions of dollars on deferred maintenance. It's just not there right now, so we are taking the prioritization approach to things. Roofs being the most critical, and then the climate control and comfort within the buildings would be second. So my hope is that the city will be able to come forward with, which I think is about $1.5 million to meet the rest of our needs for this year. And as I've shared, there's a 5-year plan and I have a 10-year outlook. So $2 to $4 million a year is what I need to maintain. I need $4 to $6 million a year to do all the catch up, and that figure's not there in this budget environment. So I think this is a balance.
And I think we can answer some of what you're suggesting when we get to item number 3 in section J on the new business. I think it'll strike a balance of what you're trying to get to with,
I think so too.
to a certain extent. But theoretically, what you're saying, yes, we can do that.
Any additional questions or comments? This is for information tonight and for action on our February 5th meeting. The next is school calendar. Dr. Copeland.
Good evening, everyone. I've got a few updates from where we were with the December meeting. So since the December meeting, we have put our online Google survey out there, and I'll talk about more details on that in a minute. We've talked with principals, of course, we've talked with you, we've talked with directors. So we've got some minor changes that I'll highlight to the calendar, but first I want to talk about the Google survey. So on December 13th, we opened the Google survey. We closed it on January 7th. Over that time frame, we had 568 responses. Of those 568 responses, 280-ish of them were from parents. 250 of them were from employees. I had 66 students that chimed in and a few that we categorized as other. So I thought it was a pretty decent feedback. Of that, I'm proud to report that 77.3%, I think the 0.3% is important because this has been my first calendar that I brought forward, but 77.3% agree strongly or somewhat with the calendar that was put out there. So what's interesting about looking at the survey responses is that people could type in some comments and things like that. We have two groups of people that are juxtaposed that feel very strongly about a couple of positions. The first position that they like is that they think the school calendar should always end in May. So you've got that group that says we should be out, we shouldn't be going to school in June. At the same time, they are struggling and counterpulling against all of those that say we should not go to school in the middle of August. Those two can never, one group's going to be unhappy no matter what we do. We've got to start in mid-August to be out by the end of May. The other thing I learned by looking at the calendar survey is that there are a lot of people that did not understand that the May 5th Professional Development Day is because of the local elections, and that several of our schools are used for polling places. So if you get those comments when you're out in the public and interacting with folks, if you could let them know that we decided to close school on May the 5th, do professional development for staff, so that we didn't have the community interacting with students and staff in the schools. We felt that was the safest thing to do. So we'll do a better job of communicating that as we go forward, so that everybody understands. The other thing that I wanted to do was hand out an updated version, hot off the presses today, of the BASS calendar. But first, let me close out a couple of the changes that we made on the LCS regular school year calendar. You'll notice that the new teacher orientation, which was 3 days in previous versions, is now down to 2 days. So it starts on August the 1st. The one major change we did there is we decided not to do the big new teacher breakfast, just bring them in and get them rolling right into the things that we think they need to know.
Well, let me just add to that. So
we're not doing the breakfast at the college, which actually was a limited audience that got to interact mostly. The board came and administrators came, but on convocation day, we're going to do a nice little welcome for brand new staff with all of the staff there, so everybody will be able to participate, and we can recognize them publicly with their colleagues that they're going to be working with, and you all will be there, and the city will be there as well. So just didn't want anybody to think that we just completely scrapped our new teachers. We love our new staff, and I'm getting that creativity going on what we're going to do that's going to be awesome and amazing on convocation day for them.
A couple of other updates. You'll notice on the kind of bottom right side of the calendar, we included kind of the key dates, so you can see when convocation is going to be, registration day, day in the park, and things like that. And then the last thing was we removed the May 30th date, which was that Saturday Professional Development Day. It was a little troublesome to manage. Some folks got things done on the last day of school. Some folks came in and did it on Saturday, so feedback led us to removing that one. So that's the LCS calendar. That's the majority of the schools. I'm going to ask Dr. Gupta to pass this around real quick while I talk about it. The BAS calendar, as you know, is unique to one school. That calendar was put together. Ms. Hendricks and I had some initial discussions, and she was going to get a little bit of feedback from our staff. So the one change in the version of the calendar that you have in your board packet versus this one is their October their October intercession week, which was the 7th through the 10th of October, has now shifted to the following week, the 14th through the 18th. As soon as they brought it up, that was one of those where you kind of go, yeah, that makes so much more sense because that aligns with the LCS fall break days of the 14th and 15th. So that gives them a 5-day intercession in October and not a 4-day. And that actually would push them to their last day of school being May 28th. The LCS calendar has the last day of school being the 29th. One thing we tried to do between the normal calendar and the BAS calendar was align our professional development days with BAS's professional development days. In previous years they had not, and they missed out on some things during the school year, so they have professional development on October 11th and March 20th with the whole school division. They're not out there by themselves. So that's the information I have to update you on the calendars. It is for action tonight, and I will try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Copeland, for your fine work. I literally understand everything you've presented. The only question that I have is just in terms of input, and I don't know if Amy could speak to this or not, but even though I understand how 280 parents, not so much concerned about the employees as such, 66 students. With the Google survey, what ways can we help increase the participation either with Google survey or other means that are being utilized to get input from parents who may not be engaged in sharing their feedback relative to calendar or any matter, but we're talking about the calendar at the present time. I'm just concerned when you say 280 parents versus 8,000 kids.
This Google survey was actually put out through the Public Information Office. It was a desire out of the last board meeting to put it out there.
I understand.
So we do everything that we normally do within public information to engage with parents. So they get the automatic email, they get the automatic phone call, they're notified through the schools, and those are the same information paths that we use when we close schools. So they get the information when we close school.
Yes, sir, and I'm not questioning that part. My question, either to be asked now at a later point in terms of an answer, how do we get persons more engaged in responding? Because it seems as though that the board is recommending, and we weigh heavily on that, but it's it's not including the input of a good number of people, at least through that. Maybe we have other means by which we are securing that. And we don't necessarily have to answer tonight if it's so many puzzled looks at me, but I am trying to make a point that if you have 7,000 or so parents and you are having input speaking to 77% of whatever you said, with 280 parents, Madam Chair, I'm wanting to know how do we reach the others?
So if I could add something to that, Dr. Coleman, there are always other discussions we can have about increasing the engagement, and I think we are working on that from many different aspects. But if you look at traditional survey response and response within the school division, I'm fairly happy with 568 responses over a 2.5-week period, because the majority of the responses that came forth were keyed in between the 13th and about the 26th of December. After that, things trailed off significantly.
So don't get me wrong, I'm not being negative, because you're right, based upon scientific replies in the past, etc. However, I must say, as a board member, I'm not satisfied knowing that we're weighing that survey and there are only 280 parents involved in it.
I think what James is saying is a problem that we've been reiterating, a problem that we've had with a lot of engagement and how we get the word out, whether we, and that's, it is a big discussion, whether we work through churches or PTO groups or other agencies.
And helping to solve this is going to help solve many of the other dynamics that Dr. Edwards is putting out that we're going to solve, but it may take a deeper look into what we do and what we find acceptable in terms of determining what we do.
Well, if I could add with this, I do believe this is probably one of the first times that we've actually asked for input outside of having an internal committee that has worked on that. And often, you know, if you haven't been asked for input, you tend to be like, well, the calendar's the calendar, that's how they do it. So that first initial response, I don't find as troubling having the number. I was actually pleasantly surprised given the window. Your point is well taken. Survey responses somewhere between, depending upon what it is. If it's something that people aren't happy about, it's usually high. If it's something that people are happy about, it's usually a little bit lower. There are other ways to get information, and the variable is time. And with this one, we had a short window of time to get information, but you know, often if you want information face-to-face, but we can imagine how much time that would take, gathering information where you know families are going to be. You know, let's just say we could have done a survey at the football game and got a lot of Heritage parents information there because we knew that they were there. So there are ways to do it if you have enough time to plan that out, and of course enough manpower, because survey self-calculates, does the work for you. I have done in the past at back to school nights, handed out cards and collected individual cards from hundreds of people and tasked my staff to sit there and input the data by hand to do that. So it is an issue that we definitely need to address, but I do want the general public in terms of this conversation to know that we did have a short window from the time that we prepared the calendar. And for many folks, this is new, being invited to that conversation at this level in terms of that. And I will say kudos to Ben for the number of times that, yes, I heard you, we're going to change this, change the color. So there was a degree of input and flexibility and an openness that said, we'll consider that.
Very good.
But the calendar committee, I have to say, that's one of the toughest ones because you said it nicely as to the two camps. It can be very emotional for some folks. So,
Dr. Coleman is saying that technology could be a barrier for families who are economically challenged to fill this survey. But response rate, normally when you do surveys lying in that range, is telling him maybe we can do a non-response bias analysis to see people who have not responded is affecting our results. And I can help him if he needs it. My question was heading up to the professional days when we have do we have any structured activities for teachers to do, or it's just they're off their own planning their lessons?
Oh, no, it's very structured. I'm looking at April out there. She's like, oh, no, it's not a day of just planning. And if you go back to what the Special Ed Advisory Committee said, and if you look at some of their recommendations for training, that's where we get some of the ideas for things that we want to offer staff. And I think this year, particularly going forward, one of the voices that we would really love to hear more of is staff voice. What are those things that will help you be the most awesome and dynamic staff member? And I say staff member, not just teachers, possible. And then how can we structure those professional development days around those opportunities for staff?
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. Copeland. This is before us tonight for action.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion or questions related to this topic?
I just want to say I'm thankful how we resolved the election day and the safety issue. I think that's huge.
It is huge. Thank you.
I was going to say we did have some discussion too about trying to work with the city to move the election day. That costs some money, and also trying to move polling places is pretty problematic too long term. And you know, based on certainly from the parent feedback that the last election is pretty clear that
we needed to do something.
This is what we needed to do.
I agree.
I think the response rate will improve as people find out.
I agree.
Next year.
Thank you. We have a motion that's been seconded. Ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Bruce, High School Program of Studies.
Good evening. At our last board meeting, we brought the high school program of studies to you for review. Each year, the development of the program of studies begins with the counseling departments at each high school working collaboratively with teachers to explore changes for the upcoming program of studies. At the same time, administrators work with parent groups and student groups to gather input. Once this preliminary work is done, the division, team of school administrators, counseling directors, and central office staff meet to update this handbook to ensure all updates meet the requirements of the Virginia Department of Education and existing budgetary restraints. The program of studies has also been available online for 1 month to gather input from the public. After a review of offerings, we need to make one revision related to online summer courses. We currently offer 2 full courses in the summer. One of those is economics and personal finance. The other is health and physical education. We have some students that opt to take these classes over the summer. Typically, it's due to scheduling conflicts that they foresee in their upcoming schedule. Maybe a student is in band and orchestra, and they need an additional period during the day, so they tend to take one of these 2 courses over the summer. Each of those courses online must have a teacher of record, and that teacher of record has to grade the work, review student progress, and communicate with the students throughout the year. There is also a significant amount of time put into setting all of the students up in the online platform. The cost for the past several years has been $150 for that particular course, or those 2 courses. And due to an increase in the enrollment and what we've seen as far as the length of time students are taking to complete the course, we really need to increase that to about $225 to break even on the cost of those 2 courses. So that was really the only change that we saw in reviewing some of the things with enrollment and budgetary things that we're going through right now. Of course, our counselors are eager to begin meeting with parents and students and start scheduling. So this is brought to you tonight for approval. Take any questions.
Dr. Gupta?
$50 if I'm not able to afford, is there a financial aid available through the school system?
So these are not required courses, these are optional courses. So this is just a student who may want to take one over the summer. It was $150, it's going to $225 to break even. So it's kind of one of those things, students have to make a choice. If you want to be in band and orchestra, you may have to make a decision to either take a course in the summer or to make up a course later on.
They're offered during the school year.
They're offered during the school year, yes. This would just
At
be
no
an
cost.
optional thing for students who may want to adjust their schedule in a certain way.
So I cannot have that option if the finance is a constraint for me.
We do not have that option right now available. We don't have a funding source for that at this moment.
So can
Dr. Nellis?
the online courses in the summer are $225.
Right.
The same courses offered online during the school year are not $225.
Right.
They're free.
They're free. They're offered during the school year for free. We do have summer programs for high school students, for students who have failed a course during the regular school year. Those are $150, and we do have some financial support available for students who are retaking a course for credit, because they're required courses. This is just kind of an extra offering that we have.
Ms. Evans?
I just have one question. You know, the problems we had this year with the yes, and all that. So when a 9th grader comes in and starts with this, and they've set their path, this will not change. Midway?
Unless we
Does
change
that,
it.
huh?
Unless we change it.
Okay.
Or the BDOE makes some changes.
Right. Yeah, we currently offer these through Edgenuity, which is the platform we use for nearly all of our online courses that we offer. If we were to get rid of Edgenuity, we would have a replacement, because we have a significant number of students accessing online courses either in the summer or throughout the school year. We had about 200 students participate last year.
No, I'm not really talking about so much the online classes, just classes in general. I'm thinking of the...
I think what Ms. Evans is saying is, if I'm a student and these are the rules that govern my high school career, are these going to be the rules that govern my entire high school career going forward?
Unless the Department of Education discontinues a course. So if the Department of Ed says we are no longer giving credit for culinary arts, that's not going to happen, but we would have to take that out of the program of studies and it wouldn't be offered. So what we will do is, and like I think I told you all last time, if we have significant changes that would impact a student, we would want to start those changes with a current 8th grade class, so that as they're moving into 8th grade, they will be able to choose courses for high school credit accordingly.
Right, that just didn't happen this year. That was that's what I'm worried about. That I just want to make sure that from going forward,
yes,
that this is the way it's going to be.
Right.
Okay.
Dr. Gupta?
His request is, could you get us the cost of operating an online course? You said break even. I'm assuming if the cap is 20 students, it's about $4,000 or $5,000. But I'm trying to figure out a dollar amount in summer. How much does it cost?
Okay. So last year we had 180 students enrolled. It cost us $37,000 last year to run the program. We only brought in $26,000 for that particular program. So we did not break even last year. The cap is 30 students. The course lasts 7 weeks, and the teachers are working about 25 to 30 hours a week. And then there's some IT payroll that has to be done as well to set up the online platform for the students.
So they're synchronous or asynchronous? The classes are synchronous or asynchronous? Asynchronous, okay.
Any other?
Dr. Brennan?
I just want to thank Dr. Evers and Dr. Bruce. Last meeting I asked about the standard diploma versus advanced diploma, and y'all were nice to provide that information to show that our statistics are about the same as the state for both of those. So thanks very much for following up on that.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes, Dr. Bruce, I'm just fascinated, this year being 2019, 400 years, Virginia, African Americans, women, etc. And I'm looking here in the social studies section, and I notice in world history, in the advanced world history, there's a mentioning of the civilizations in Africa, Americas, Asia, and Europe, etc. And then I notice that there is an African American Studies full credit year course. In my other review of the social studies section, I think that's basically where I see that mentioning of that subgroup. Do you know how many students typically enroll in the African American Studies course? This is not the first time it's been offered.
I do not know that number right off the top of my head, but I could get that for you.
All right. And also, as it relates to the totality of our social studies program for the high school, do you feel that we are adequately addressing all of those particular subgroups within those various courses that are being offered?
There's always room to add. We've got a very diverse student population. We would love to add more courses. We would have to put out an interest survey to see who's interested in those courses to make sure we have enough students interested to actually offer them.
Madam Chair, I'd be interested at some point finding out how the board could weigh in on that discussion.
And we did adopt new history books, or social studies textbooks last year. And when we went in to look at the objectives in that textbooks, they were very specific and very offered a lot of opportunities for study in many areas.
Okay.
They may still have that downstairs, but if you take time to look at that, the way it's set up, I thought it was very well done.
I'm just noticing at the college level, across the country, not limited to Lynchburg, there seems to not necessarily be a breadth of knowledge around a variety of subgroup histories.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? This has been brought to us tonight for action. Is there a motion to approve the high school program of studies 2019-20?
Move to approve the high school program of studies for 2019-20.
Second. Any more discussion or comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That concludes the unfinished business. Let's move to new business, to the middle school program of studies. They just didn't want you to have to go far.
Okay, very similarly, the development of the middle school program of studies begins at the school level, working with stakeholders to explore changes for the upcoming program of studies. Again, once that preliminary work is done, that's when we get into our division level committee. We work for about 2 to 3 months on these. Counseling directors, central office staff, the principals from each school all meet to update that program of studies. And again, we're looking for, does it meet the requirements set forth by the Virginia Department of Education? And is it within the budgetary constraints that we have as a school division? The main updates for this year include our revised math sequencing chart, updated information on gifted services, special education, and remediation opportunities. And it also provides clarity on math, not only sequencing but placement, and courses offered for high school credit, including the addition of a full high school credit for the Introduction to Theater course. After a review of the course enrollment, we needed to make one revision here as well about offering Latin in the middle schools. Currently, we have very little interest in this course, and we have less than 10 students across the city in all 3 middle schools enrolled. So it's something that we would propose to take out of the middle school program of studies while still leaving it in the high school program of studies at this time. And this will be available online later this week to gather public input. And we bring it to you tonight for information and for any questions that you have.
Any questions? Dr. Nilles?
Makes sense. Okay. What's online, is there going to be a note to the fact that Latin is going to be dropped in the middle is being proposed, just so people, it obviously doesn't matter to a lot of people, but it probably really matters to a few.
Okay.
Two questions. One is, can you help me one more time to talk about the difference between the PEDAL program versus the RISE program, what their goals are, and about how many students participate in those?
So our PEDAL program is actually, it stands for Promoting Excellence Through Accelerated Learning, and that particular program is for students who exhibit some strengths in their academic area of math in 6th grade and 7th grade. What we are doing there is we are trying to catch them up and get them in line to take Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. So we're looking for those students who are recommended by faculty and staff at the elementary level, And we're putting them into that class. It's a double period class, so they're able to get 6th and 7th grade curriculum mostly covered in a year. So that's the PEDAL course. The RISE courses are for students who have deficiencies in particular areas and are not performing on grade level and need additional supports that are individualized to their particular strengths or weaknesses so that we can meet them where they need to be and move them on grade level.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how many students participate in the PEDAL course?
Yeah, PEDAL typically is one class per middle school, so class size ranges anywhere from 15 to 20 typically.
One of the reasons I asked that is because one of the comments that's come up in some of the discussion about the governor's school is trying to identify students in minority groups in middle school who could then move on and be identified and supported to go to the governor's school as junior and seniors, and was raised whether the PEDAL environment or those group of students are some that should be sort of helped into high school and sent down that way. Do you have any thoughts about that, or does that make any sense?
It does make sense. It's definitely a group of students that we like to wrap some support services around and embrace them as they move through the math curriculum. Our goal, of course, is to have them end up in AP Calculus by the time they're a senior. So we just try to support them as they're going along. First goal, of course, is to get to Algebra 1 in 8th grade, and then to continue on in that advanced level curriculum to get to AP Calculus.
Okay. I think that's one more question, a little more specific. On page 94, where it talks about course selection decisions for high school, and the criteria are that achievement score, teacher recommendations, or parent request, does that help identify those students who may not do well on standardized testing, who may be able to go into high school courses? You know, we talked about that in the gifted programs, trying to identify students who may not do well as far as standard tests, but really do have attributes that would make them be in the gifted category. Does that also apply to this area as far as trying to identify those students, or is this a different group of students?
You mean as far as parent requests into PEDAL?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not talking about PEDAL. Okay. Moving on to students who want to apply for high school credits in middle school.
Okay.
And the guidelines are now, it's based, they can apply based upon their achievement score, number one, teacher recommendations, or parent request. Do we miss any students that may not do well on standard scoring, may not get a teacher recommendation, may not have a parent who's involved in their schooling who should be considered for high school courses?
Well, we would hope we're not missing anybody. We are working really closely with the teachers to make sure we're catching students periodically throughout the year. We're not just asking them at the very end of the year when they're exhausted, do you have any students that can move on? So we're constantly in communication with them, collecting information on students. Not only just the achievement data is how they're doing on pre-tests and post-tests, how they're doing in the classroom in their grading, and any other assessments that the teachers are giving. So, and then we're talking with parents too, especially when it's an issue where the student is a very capable student, but may not just be doing homework, and that might be why their grades are not where they need to be. That's when we're wrapping the parent into the conversation to say, hey, your student has really got a strength in mathematics or whatever subject it may be, and can we work together to get the student where they need to be?
Great, thank you.
Dr. Coleman?
Dr. Bruce, congratulations on your most recent accomplishment as well. Thank you for the fine job you are doing. I just, as a general statement, as it relates to both of these programs of study, as it relates to how the board is comprised, Madam Chair, I want to emphasize, I'd like to know how we can get more involved. I have not done my part in terms of being as involved as I should be where I can. You mentioned from time to time, I know someone has invited me to come and review some books. I can't remember exactly which school, and I'm looking forward to that. But curriculum is very important. Now, I want to say this. Sometimes students may not necessarily know what they should be interested in. And once they get out into the global world, do they really understand all they need to understand? And so I've approved these programs of studies now however many years, but I'm not sure, Madam Superintendent, if I'm absolutely convinced that I'm doing my part to help in that regard, in making sure a child is being exposed to everything that they need to be exposed to, that they may or may not know they're interested in. I have 2 middle school daughters. They're doing a good job over there, a good job being done over there in school, but I'm concerned about that, Madam Chair, and I will get more data and better understanding of what I'm trying to say in future meetings.
Thank you, James. All right, any other questions? All right, this is for information tonight and action at our next meeting. So if you start reviewing this and you have additional questions, I know that Dr. Bruce would appreciate you getting to them to her ahead of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to Capital Improvement Plan, William Marvin Bass Elementary School.
The capital improvement plan for this year includes $60,000 for the replacement of the gym floor at Bass Elementary. It is a traditional maple wood floor. We are bringing forth these two bids and recommending Miller Flooring to do that job for $60,185. If they have to replace subflooring above the quantity that's in the bid, then they will charge an additional $7 a square foot. You'll notice that it is a minimum of $125 over what the budget was estimated to be. We have a CIP reserve, which is currently up to $90,000. So we have sufficient funds in the reserve to cover any small overage over the budget. The way the CIP reserve gets populated with funding is whenever we have a project that comes in under budget, then we will transfer money to the reserve in the eventuality that you get a project that might be a little bit over budget. So in essence, the savings from the Dunbar Middle School gym floor will help fund the remaining portion of the Bass gym floor. So other than that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Dr. Brennan?
So, Dr. Copeland, I think you may have commented on this already, but just to help me, so the base bid was obviously lower with Miller. Their cost for the replacement of subflooring is twice what the other company was, so we're assuming that there's not, if they find subflooring to replace, it's not going to be that large a number to increase their.
Correct. The bid itself contains a preset amount of subflooring that's in the cost, and then if there's anything above that, then they would charge the $7 a square foot. So $60,000, the number to key on for this one.
Okay, so it won't go up significantly based on that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? I thought I heard in our finance meeting that the that was like a $21,000 reinvestment for the replacement of the subflooring. Did I get that wrong?
At the time that we had the prep meeting for the board agenda, the CIP reserve was at $21,000.
Okay.
When I got the December report,
And
all
it's
the
up.
accounts moving around, that
Okay.
had increased to $90,000.
Okay. All right, this is for information. Any other questions for you? This is for information and action on February 5th.
Put this on the consent agenda for the next meeting.
Are you in agreement that we move this to the consent?
You can always pull it to the side, too.
Do we vote on that? Just move it to the consent agenda? Okay. Thank you. All right, that takes us to request for a reallocation for 2018-2019.
School administration has recognized the need to reallocate funds from various salaries and benefits operating accounts throughout the school funds. You'll notice here that we want to reallocate funds from those existing payroll and benefits accounts to maintenance and facilities, IT, student services, and schools. And you see the amount for the total of $1.2 million. Now, first, let me make, first of all, this is not asking for an increase in our existing budget. I'm not asking for an increase, we're just asking to reallocate that was in previous accounts, payroll accounts, to other needs. Secondly, you will say, well, how do these funds arise? For example, when we budget in payroll, we budget for everybody being 100% of whatever salary is. People leave, and by the time they leave and we replace them, you have a gap there. The difference falls out to what's available. Sometimes when people leave, we hire people that may be of a less salary. The same thing it drops here. Now, if we don't reallocate it during the year, it ends up, so to speak, you leave money on the table coming at the end of the year. Whereas we have needs that we can cover right now with this reallocation. So that's what we're doing here, just reallocating. I would also bring to your attention, you see we're asking for, and you see the list by facilities and maintenance. I just want to point out for facility and maintenance in particular. You had mentioned the deferred maintenance. the facilities and maintenance budget has not increased since I came here over 7 years ago. The only way they get extra funds to do some of these things that you don't see here, and normally these are one-time expenditure, they're not continuous expenditure, other than, like I say, for the insurance or gas that you use for the vehicles. But outside of that, and the reason the budget has not increased is by the time we finish prioritizing all the other needs, theirs drop to the bottom. They never get funded. Practically, at this point, he's out of money right now because of some of these things that pops up. So that's Dr. Gupta, when he was asking earlier, rather than waiting till moving from one fund to the other, if we could do this reallocation throughout the year, you still cover both. The effect is still the same. So that's why I'm recommending. Last year, if you notice, I didn't do any reallocations because it was just a little too tight. We were putting everything towards the medical claims. In this case, now that we're a little bit I won't say freer, but we are not as tight. So we are asking to reallocate some of the various, and I will go through all the payroll and the benefits accounts, project what I expect my June 30th balance to be, anything available. That's what I'm talking about now. And you can see the detailed list by department of the items that we're requesting the reallocation for. I would also point out to you that this 1.2 million is 1.22% of our total budget, so it's not like we miss our budget. It's a small amount. And if you looked at our $80 million salary and benefits account, that's 1.46%. So it's a small amount, but as yet it can cover items that we currently need.
To add to one thing, Mr. Beckles highlighted the second item underneath facilities and maintenance, the rebuilding of the 2 chillers at Lincoln Middle School. That is currently an FY21 capital improvement project. So we will remove that. If this goes forward approved, then we will remove that from our submission to the city when we update that at the end of the month. So
what I'm hearing from you is these are not luxury items, these are essential.
No, we don't have the luxury of getting luxury items. I can assure you of that. I mean,
so these like snow removal equipment. You know, we had a big snowstorm in December, and I think the snow plows were broken, so they were broken. They need to be replaced.
Correct. And we noticed, like Mr. Copeland pointed out, we moved some items off of the CIP, which we have to the city. We moved those now, so you don't have this issue to address come fund balance. Maybe a year from now, by the time we get through the whole thing, we could do those now, so it relieves that pressure off of the city funding those pieces of CIP issues. So we are trying to help ourselves and help the city by reallocating where we can to get some of those major items done earlier rather than later.
I have a question that we're taking this money from various salary and benefits account. Why are we not putting them back into salaries and benefits for our employees?
Okay, remember I just made a comment that these are one-time items. If you do that, what you would do is you would automatically increase your base budget for next year if you do that for ongoing expenditures. That's why for all these reallocations, if you notice, they are one-time expenditure items. That means they're not going to occur next year. But if you do it for an expense like a salary, that is going to occur next year. So now you've just increased your base budget by whatever. Let's say I've taken this 1.2 and do it for salaries. What I've done now is I've automatically increased my base salary budget for next year $1.2 million.
Because then it becomes an ongoing fixed cost forever.
It's an ongoing fixed cost.
Dr. Gupta?
I just had a comment. I'm glad you're spending some money in information technology. I wish we can spend more because our kids need the latest and the state-of-the-art technology going forward and to compete in this world, in the modern day.
Well, that's true, but if you notice, these are what I would call back-of-the-house support pieces. And we haven't gotten to what you're talking about yet.
We're one of the first ones to put Chromebooks in kids' hands, so don't lose sight of that.
Dr. Nilles?
Yeah, I want to recognize the foresight in getting off-site data disaster recovery back up in place, because just from personal experience, it's at home.
It's critical.
You know, something goes down, it's like, you know, and now we're looking at an entire school division with records and finances, and you try to reboot that, and that's pretty ugly. Question
extremely
on,
ugly.
there was another question on the rebuilding of the 2 chillers for Linkhorn. Is this, could they be replaced? Would be, I know it sound like it'd be more expensive, but is this kind
Come
of
on up, Mr. Gadsky.
semi-Band-Aid kind of
You're
thing?
right.
You know, what's the longevity of a rebuild?
That's why I got an expert.
Well, good. He's been quiet for a long time, so.
These chillers are around 20 years old, and actually what we're doing is they're trained chillers, and the manufacturer recommends this rebuild program. They call it the renewal. About somewhere between 15 and 20 years. We've had it on our plan, on our schedule for a couple of years, and just weren't able to do it. But what this will do is basically make new chillers out of what's there. They go through the whole thing, rebuild the compressors, and we get another 10-year warranty out of it. And this equipment generally has a life of 20 to 30 years. So,
okay.
And it is cheaper.
Okay.
We're looking at like $75,000 per chiller, whereas a new chiller will run us about $150,000 to $175,000 for one.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Dr. Gupta?
You know, we had a high school student looking for $35,000, which is a great achievement this year to have a state championship. Is there a flexibility in our budget so we can fund from a general fund for those kids to have their rings and things they want? I don't know what the legality and things, Mr. Beckles may know better than
I can answer that because at the building level, when you have state championship teams, it has been traditionally not funded. It has not been funded by the school or the school board. The athletic boosters or their parents, sometimes the athletic department, they all chip in. And I know this from the various state championship teams that they buy. They also have different types of rings that they can buy, and that adds to the cost as well. But it has not been something that the school board has been able to take on. It's more of responsibility of the athletic teams or the boosters.
Fairly
common
at least throughout the state.
Yeah.
So.
Dr. Coleman?
To Dr. Gupta's point and to your eloquent answer, I still believe we need to get ahead of the game, if I'm on point, with managing those who do not understand that in our community.
So you think there are people that think that we pay for rings?
I am telling you, Madam Chair, what I have shared with you, and I am stating that there are a lot of people who do not understand. First of all, when the young lady said $20,000, I did like this. That's
expensive.
That's not 2 cents. However, there are people who do not understand and think then that you have kids who have gone out and served as a credit to Lynchburg City and to Lynchburg City schools, and there's no way to let them have that type of memorabilia for years to come. And I just think we need to do a better job of helping the public to understand things like that. So in barbershops and beauty salons and other gathering places, accurate information can be disseminated.
The News in Advance did have a nice article about that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And also kind of went into the history of some of the surrounding school divisions and that are in a similar situation.
Okay, any addition, Dr. Brennan?
Sure. So getting back to the request, going down the list for facilities and maintenance and information technology and then student services, thank you all very much for the nice explanation about the 2 vans and the 2 cars for social services. Dr. Copeland, that was very helpful to get that information. I think in the finance meeting we also talked about the purchasing of the uniforms, and as a guardian with a child on the band, I'm all in favor of getting them uniforms and what a great job they do. I'm also familiar with what their boosters do as far as the efforts they make. Is that, I think someone's going to look into that idea, is there funds or is this it's a lot of money, $84,000 for the uniforms. I know that they're expensive, but is there some other way that we should plan in the future for that to be done, as far as some type of reserve that the band does their booster club over time when we know it has to be replaced every 5 or 10 years? Was that, so you had said that you thought there was some resource at Glass for
there was a fund in the past, and I think both high schools were given $5,000 a year to put into a fund, so that when it came time to purchase new uniforms, I don't know the status of that anymore, but
they're still given those funds, but they use that for, I call regular stuff. They don't really, it's not sufficient to cover their regular, I can call it musical stuff, and buy the uniforms. In all fairness to the schools, they have requested those, but again, it was one of those items that never made the tier request because other things, well, the higher priority, I would say, not important when the uniforms are important, but as a higher priority, it never made the tier 1 list. So they have been putting it in. And this list here, the uniforms is about $450 a piece. It's 70 sets for Heritage and 115 for Glass. Now, if we want to, and I just figure out a way to do it, buy a certain amount every year, that you kind of replenish them so you don't end up with a $84,000, $85,000 hit at one time. We can do that, but it would be in addition to the 5,000 additional. I would say the 5,000 plus and whatever we put aside or replenish the band uniform that particular year with. We can do it that way.
But they'll change the band uniforms every 10 or 15 years. They'll look for a different type of uniform. So buying more would.
You've got it both sides.
Just within the design of Heritage High School and the fielding of the furniture equipment, fabrics and colors change on a regular basis. So I wouldn't advocate buying 15 uniforms this year and 15 uniforms the next year, because you're going to end up with 5 different shades of blue and 5 different shades of orange.
So one of the things we're trying to do with the budget, and you heard me mention that they're sitting with schools, is to actually plan for this. So we'll start to know if we get new uniforms this year. Well, we know next year's not their year. That's not going to come up, but when might be their year. And then looking at those big item purchases and staggering them so that we can say to departments, okay, so it's the year for, we're going to redo these uniforms or instruments, or we need all new math manipulatives, or whatever it is, but to really start to project how do we do that, and then through working with the directors and April and Willis and LaTanya and their teams to say, we're all working together. We know that it's not the year for music this year. It's a year for math or whatever that is. So we're trying to get there. And just to go back to what Ben and Anthony also said regarding maintenance, rather than have them be well, we hope we have extra money for you department, to actually get them to plan for regular maintenance and have that as part of their budget. This is our regular maintenance plan, and not, we hope there's money to rebuild a chiller or do some of those maintenance things too. So it will take us a couple years to get it fully up and running like that, but that's the direction that we're moving.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the explanation for that initiative, and thank you all for that presentation.
This is up for information tonight and for action on our February 5th meeting. All right. J4, Lynchburg City School Board Governance's Policy Review and Updates. And I am not going to read all those.
No, you do not have to read all of that. That's self-explanatory. The Governance Committee, Policy Committee met on December 17th to review several policies. And I will say we put this as our introduction. One of the things that we're trying to do with all of our board policies, in addition to responding when VSBA sends us an update, it's really important that the board has a pretty good understanding of the policies that govern their activities in the school division. So one of the things that I try to do is make sure that policies are reviewed at least every 3 to 5 years, 3 being ideal, 5 being a pretty good
good span of time. And that way, as you have new board members come on board, there might be policies that you weren't here when they were approved or you don't know anything about. So this gives us an opportunity to do that. Most of what we did in our governance meeting, with the exception of policy BDDG, was to review policies that were last reviewed in 2013. So these are things that were 5 and 6 years ago that we just wanted to put our eyes on again. So when you see things like no recommended changes, that's not a VSBA thing. That's us looking and saying, yes, we still feel that way about that policy, or we still want that to be the message or the guidance that we use for that. So we went through several. One of the equity lenses, equity habits that kicked in is we had through our policies chairman, and I think we replaced that with chairperson, especially since we have a chairperson, to make that change. So that's a minor change in some of those updates. There were some things that the committee wanted the full board to take a peek at and discuss. And I think one of those is in the calling of special meetings. And there were some recommended changes. The way the policy is written right now, the school board chair can, or 2 board members. And we had a discussion in our 2 board member person policy committee as to whether or not the full board would look at that and think and consider, should that be a full board recommendation. So I'll turn it over to the 2 to lead the discussion, or anybody who has questions about that. And that's on BDB.
Yeah, so I think on that one, our recommendation was that we wanted to have the majority of the board vote if it was going to be a special meeting, and not just have it be a small number of people to call a special meeting was the only change on that. The other, can I move on with other things, or?
Wait, does anybody have any questions about
That's on page 128.
Yeah.
What's triggering that change from 2 members to majority?
So it said, let's see what, now a special meeting can be called on the current policy when necessary. Special meetings are held when called by the chairperson or when requested by 2 or more members. And we thought that was a fairly small number of people to call a special meeting of the board, which is a fairly big thing to do, that it should be a majority of the board votes on that, rather than just have either the chairperson or vice chairperson or a small number of the board to have a special meeting. So, as we all know, any member can bring an item to the board.
Supposed to vote
I guess it would
without it being in a meeting.
Excuse me?
How are we supposed to vote without being in a meeting?
I don't know.
I mean, I'm just...
Yeah, you can answer that question if you want.
That's a very good question that you raised.
Yeah.
But I think our focus was on the actual meeting being able to be called by 2 people.
So that's fine. If you want to keep it there, that's fine. We just thought that seemed a little unusual that just 2 people could call a special meeting.
How many times have you called a special meeting historically?
I'm like politicians now, do not recall.
The question is, yeah.
I'll say none. I got one more. I got a year on it. I get the concern, but on the other hand, if there's abuse, then the board can revise the policy at the next meeting. I mean,
yeah.
But it's the way it's worded. We got to we got to have a vote to
You'd
call
have
a
to
meeting,
call a
but we
meeting
got to
to
have be
call-
in a meeting to call a vote.
Sure.
So, and 2 people can right now. 2 people can do that because that's not a public meeting.
Okay, that's great.
If they start jerking the board around, then the rest of the board should take them outside.
Let me be clear. Dr. Notes, you were suggesting, for example, that if you as school board member Mason wanted to have a special school board meeting on tomorrow, then we would all have to convene tomorrow at 5:30, just on 2 persons without having consulted the chair?
No.
And if
The
you
wording there is a reasonable timing. The word
chairperson is
reasonable and is there. So it cannot be tomorrow.
What you say, Doctor?
I think the wording there is it needs to be reasonable time to be able to arrange.
It has to be public announcement too.
Right. And that's got to be 3 days. I think.
Yeah, that's just my eyes. I don't see all that y'all are suggesting here. It might be implied somewhere else, but I don't see it in this language. Thank you so much, because I need to get my eyes. Well, whatever the pleasure of the full group is, it just seems to me to be dangerous to do that. My guess is we didn't even know that was in here. And now that we do know it's in here, if a person started to do that every other day, Dr. Miller's, then I would have a problem with that.
We will change the policy then.
So just to back up a little bit, so what this committee is trying to do is to review these policies so that all of us don't have to go through them in detail. So that was one suggestion, but clearly this is at the service of the board. So if the board feels we want to keep that the same way, that's fine.
Fine with me.
And then we can change it at a later date.
Even if one board member thinks some issue is important which people needs to hear, so be it. We call a board meeting as long as there is enough time to inform the public. So 2 is just a random number, but it provides board members opportunities to put forth issues which they personally think are important. So
okay, and that's fine. The other policy we talked about is, and Dr. may have to help me with, I think it's the one that follows that, which is the one about committees.
BCE.
127.
Page 127.
Thank you very much. So this policy, if I can get to it, 26, 27, here we go. Here, school board committees. So the policy states that the first sentence, there should be no standing committees of the Lynchburg City School Board except business and finance, instruction, administration and community relations, and student discipline. And we currently, I think, actively only have the business and finance and the student discipline. So the question was, well, point number 1 was that Dr. Edwards appropriately pointed out that we want to define what the Student Discipline Committee is, which is added there. The Student Discipline Committee is composed of the chairperson or vice chairperson and 2 members on a rotating basis, which is which is the way we currently do it. So it fits in what we're currently doing. That was probably the appropriate major change. And then discussion came up that we don't have these other committees. And should we add them or should we delete them? One comment I'll make is I was sort of a proponent of having a community relations committee. So per Dr. Edwards' suggestion, I called VSBA to see if any other school districts have that, and they don't have that. They do think it's important to have community relation liaison. It's important to have legislative advocates, but probably don't need to have a committee of a board to do that since other districts don't do that. So I think was helpful information. So this is what the feeling of the board is. Number 1, is it okay to change the student discipline committee is comprised of the chairperson, vice chair, and 2 members on a rotating basis? And do we want to do anything with the list of committees that are on that sheet, on that policy?
And as a member of the committee, at the first statement where it says instruction, I guess that's what I'm getting at with my earlier comments, because I believe that we should have some discussion around instruction at a committee level.
I'm sorry, I was trying to figure out what an instruction committee would do. Dr. Gupta?
My request is I'd like to see how a process flow chart sort of thing where how the information comes to the full board. Is it vetted out by individual committees or just presented by staff members straight to the full board? You know what I'm saying? And is that process uniform across or is it scattered all? So all the financial information comes to the finance committee first, then to the board. So are items for action and information are being discussed in individual committees before they come to full board.
Related to instruction or
related to anything. Because you discussed all these committees, so their role and function is to sort of vet those things out, discuss them in detail, and before they come for full board.
Right.
So what is the process? You know, the sort of laying out a process flow chart of how that information is flowing up to the full board.
Well, I'm sure Dr. Evers can comment on that, but just specifically, we do have business and finance, we do have discipline, we just do not have instruction, administration, and community relations. So those are the ones that we're talking about.
Yeah, but all those information will be coming through those committees. So if that information is coming, you need that committee in place.
Right now, we just bring the information directly to you. So like April did a presentation on the program of studies. She did it for the full board.
That's what I mean. You know, once you have the process flow chart laid out, then it'll be uniform across every item which comes has been vetted out by a committee before it comes to the full board.
I understand what you're saying, but we don't want to get into the day-to-day administration of.
You're not getting. What you're doing is before an item comes, it is presented by a board committee instead of a staff member straight to the board.
You lost me on that one. I'm sorry, say that.
The items are presented by, like a finance committee presents the budget for next year. So it's presented by a committee where the staff and the board members have discussed and looked at details of every item presented to the full board. I'm assuming that's the purpose of putting that instructional committee in place, is so to make it uniform across. Maybe we can discuss in a work session.
I don't think you were recommending that we're putting one in place. I think if you go back to my earlier statement about the our current policies, and there's no date on this one, being last reviewed, sort of, let's just assume this was 2013, I'm not sure, putting eyes on it again and saying, is this still our current practice? Is it the most effective practice? Do we need to do anything with it? And you know, Dr. Brennan said, this is the language that is currently in our policy, which does not match our current practice because we have two standing committees. And before the committee said, delete that because we don't do that, that's the conversation that we bring to the full board.
So Dr. Gupton, to run through a scenario or two related to kind of the way you're approaching this. If VDOE changes the profile of a graduate, that's going to affect how we deliver high school courses, okay? If we have to bring that to an instructional committee of the board before we put it in practice, it is a step that's going to add time to whatever we're doing because VDOE has already said you shall do this going forward. So it could be a layer that might not be needed because if we use the program of studies, then in all the reviews that Dr. Bruce did on the program of studies, then once she got it to the point, before she brought it to the board, she's going to have another meeting with another group to vet it through them. Our timelines are starting to get a little longer, and we're already struggling with some of the reduced manpower.
I don't disagree with you. It's just streamlining the processes. You know, it's like people are following different lanes, and some people are just entering into the lane as and when needed. Think about what will happen to the traffic. So it's just, that's why I said having a process map, maybe we can visualize in a work session and then see how we are following different processes. So some can come straight to the board, other have to go through a committee. So you got multi-tier layers, but that's for a later, we can do in a work session.
And Madam Chair, yes, I appreciate you making the statement about not getting into the day-to-day because I don't think that this board wants to do that, so I totally agree with you on that. I like Dr. Brennan looking out and seeing what other school boards are doing. At the end of the day, we have two committees that are functional, it appears, the student discipline and the finance. Now, in some of the student discipline meetings, which are what they are, there are matters that maybe the board being able to ask questions. I don't see it as getting into the day-to-day, but having some periodic opportunity to raise questions about how that process is unfolding. What are we hearing? How do we weigh in? You know, how is this part being developed? Because Dr. Copeland is right. You have mandates at our expertise level, or the reality of it having to be done in a timely fashion is time sensitive, and we're not interested in interfering with that. But this board is basically presently saying we're weighing in on discipline and we're weighing in on finance. And I think that the classroom is where our product gets fully delivered.
So what you're saying is that we are should have additional conversation about whether or not we want to have these committees made up of board members and staffs, and what those committees would look like.
Or something else that may not be mentioned that somebody on the board thinks might be a viable committee.
Yes, offer just a perspective. I'm all a fan of committees, but I think at some point we could over committee. One of the things that we're doing quite nicely right here is the result of policy committee. So through policy, we looked at something that's our practice, and we're having a discussion about that practice with the full board. We happen to be doing this with governance policies because they govern how the board operates. I think Dr. Copeland's going to follow me with student services policies, and then Belle, you might have been in that discussion with that. And I think through, and maybe we need to give it time to kind of vet through these policy discussions. Inherent in that is a discussion about practice. So when you get to a lot of the instruction and program policies, which are I think they're the I's and the J's, I'm not sure where they are, and many of them still have to be converted from the old to the new, just like the two of us, or the two of you and I were engaged in this discussion about, wow, we didn't know this, we didn't. I think the same thing will happen in those policy committees where there'll be a discussion about, oh, I didn't know. And then when we come here to, just like you explained, this is the thought process behind why we questioned the 2 board member versus a majority board member, and everybody got to participate in the discussion. I think it'll be a little bit more fruitful, and we'll accomplish 2 birds with 1 stone. We'll be looking at the policies, which is the board's governance area, but also having that opportunity to talk about practice as it relates to those policies, and then bringing that to the full board in this section to have that discussion to kind of vet out where we are. So,
my opinion is, whenever you need a full board approval, that's not micromanaging. It means it's the consent of the board is required to move forward with that action item. Now, having said that, when you have a committee of 2 members, 2 of your colleagues, you know they have vetted it, they have read it through deep. So when they bring it, you rely on their opinion, and it's easy to move it forward. Most of the questions are already being asked, so you don't spend time here going around in circles. So I think having that process streamlined across different items will help us managing this meeting better.
But that's a different.
I do too.
Yes.
That is how we're doing it.
So, but it's only, you said discipline and finance right now, you know, so if you.
We have we're doing them on the policy of the students, so that's coming next. That's a different committee, and we've already met twice.
Okay, so as long as the committees meet, you know.
Yeah, I think we need to clarify that there are 2 types of committees, just so that we're clear. The committees, as per this policy, have 3 board members, a minimum of 3 board members on them, which make them quasi-public committees. The policy advisory committees, which are the committees that meet with me or my designee or, you know, directors or Dr. Copeland, they have 2 board members on them. So the practice that you want to have happen is happening in the policy committees, which is something that we've started. I think the governance and governance committee has met probably and done the most
policies. This might have been was this your first one? Second one.
Personnel's met.
Personnel and operations have met. And, you know, finance, we got some work to do. The finance policy, we have some work to do in terms of that. So we haven't met to discuss that. And during those smaller policy meetings, I do think we get a lot of questions and feedback. And we had a great time of, well, maybe this is something we want to have the full board discuss and talk about to do exactly what you're talking about. So I think what you're asking for is in play, but starting to be more in play, and you'll see more of what this section and then Dr. Copeland's section, you'll see more discussion or more opportunity for the board to discuss things that are affected through that.
It's my naiveness. When does a meeting becomes a public meeting? So 2 or more board members, or 3 or more board members?
It's 3.
3.
Dr. Edwards, I like what you just said. So are you suggesting that, what are you calling these other committees?
I call them policy committees. So do you remember when we had the discussion about recess for a work session? And the first thing that I do, anytime you guys say, well, this is what we do, the first thing I look for is what is the policy that governs that practice? So I pulled the policy. We don't have a recess policy, so to speak, but we have a policy in which recess is mentioned in it. So that's the kind of thing when you're reviewing the policies, you're like, oh, here's recess. This is what it talks about in terms of recess. Here's grading. This is what it talks about in terms of our grading policy. Student discipline is a policy that's in there. There are lots of policies that we need to review on a regular.
So should that be stated here?
Stated where?
Under BCE.
Well, BCE talks about the official school board committees, which are at least, and that's why we put that language in it. It says standing committees are comprised of 3 board members each. Those aren't the policy committees. The policy committees are the ones that I put in place so that you all could help me and my team do the work that we need to do, which is guided by policy. So it's to do what Dr. Gupta has asked us to do, but we needed your input in a way.
I hear that, and that makes sense. 50 years from now, 60, 70 years from now, and you're not here.
I'm still going to be here.
70, 80, 90, good. I could. That's what I want. My point is, but would that be tied to the superintendent over against us ensuring that that work constantly gets reviewed? Because I like what you said. Thank you, Bill, for bringing that up, because I hadn't been thinking about these policy committee pieces that you were talking about. But my point is, no harm intended. Many of these policies had not been reviewed. They had been dying on the vine since the 1960s, 70s, so forth and so on. So I like what I'm saying, do we have an obligation to ensure that that continues and never gets back to a place where we're not looking at it? And are these school board committees really what that is suggesting when you talk about administration and so forth? I'm just not sure. And maybe we just need to move on and pull this, because I also would be interested in high-performing boards. What are the basic committees that high-performing boards have so that you aren't overly engaged in committee work, etc.?
I'll do some research.
Yeah.
Was that what you investigated?
Yeah. Oh, no, I just look at that one section. But just to add on to that, I think, just to reiterate, I think what people have said is that we are talking about these board committees that require 3 members, that are public meetings, that are fairly official process, where what we're talking about with the policy committees are more working sessions where we can sit down and we can find what's going on. You have our session, not only did we get these questions, but Dr. Edwards called our legal advisor and asked, were these things okay? There was a lot of stuff that came out of that meeting to try to help to bring it here so that we wouldn't have to go through all that again. But the ultimate goal is to bring it here and to get this group's approval. Right. And I think, I totally, if you think you should not be a majority for a special meeting, that's great, that's the board's decision. But we're just trying to sort of tee it up for you and then be able to approve it.
But on the committee piece, are we prepared tonight to just leave it at the, Bob's point is good. We have more committees now than we actually have. So we have to do something about that.
We have to look at that.
Yeah.
But I think that perhaps we should take some time to do that.
Okay.
Because it's not.
Yeah.
Dr. Nillis?
I guess it's I'm a little nonplussed with what's the discussions, and obviously there was a lot of feedback that some people have, everybody doesn't have. When we've gone through extensive policy update reviews, we've had work sessions, we've had the lawyer here to kind of help guide that. Everybody gets the same gets the information at the same time. You know, this is me picking a nit here. You know, chairman was never chairman. Now it's going to be chairperson, which I find kind of clunky. If you're going to do this, then let's maybe offer up chair and vice chair. But then that's going to propagate through all the policies. So it's not just a one-off kind of thing. So when we did some regular policy updates, they were work sessions. I felt like they worked good. I don't know what, some of the other board members with a longer tenure. I don't know, Mr. Copeland's looking at me kind of
the only
with concern.
Work sessions that we've done related to policies were when we did discipline.
Right.
All these original policies. June 4, 2013, that was the first group of policies that we converted from the old to the new. So we've brought you the personnel policies in packets, and we hope to continue to do that because we still have a significant, as Dr. Coleman said, we still have a significant number of policies that need to be worked through.
So what I'm taking away from this is that we are, as a board, need to decide how we're going to do business. That if we're going to continue to have information vetted and then brought to us, and then we do it, or are there committees that that information has to go through? And that's not, I'm not sure right now. Belle.
I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. I think the way we did it last Friday was great. For the policy committee I'm on, I can't imagine trying to do that with the full board for every policy. I think it would take, I'm not sure we'd get through. I just think it would be a really long time to get through. The way Ben ran the meeting was efficient. We got through it. We got a lot done last week. I really like the way we're doing it.
I just want to second that too, and that's what this committee did, the same thing. We went through a lot of discussion, a lot of things, and it all does come back to the board for your decision. I mean, you can take the time, and everyone should take the time to go through these policies. They're part of your agenda. You're allowed to look at them, you're allowed to comment on them. We're just trying to bring more information, have it screened one time by board members to make it a little bit more efficient. So I agree. I don't want to sit necessarily through these things as a whole board and ask some of the questions that we've already had answered we can bring back to the board.
And I'm sitting here and I don't have a clue about what you're talking about.
But it's in here.
No, that's why, that's my concern. It's like you had a lot of discussion, a lot of feedback, more understanding.
But you didn't get it.
And so we get this sort of gets plopped in front of us, and I don't know.
Okay.
But I feel like the majority of the policy update is coming from the Virginia School Board. A lot of what we're changing is their direct policy.
But we don't always do their
No,
policies.
but when we don't, you've kind of attached and said, we're leaving the same, we're not leaving the same. So if we do go through the time and read through it all before the meeting, I just can't imagine trying to go through every policy of every different committee with all 9 members at once.
Yes, I think so.
I just think that would be very difficult.
Do some research on the different committees.
So we're going to, it's been suggested by several board members that we put this on a work session for discussion.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
So do we stop our meetings? I don't understand.
How we do business, do we?
Yeah. See, it seems to be a lot of different valid thoughts about how we do this. And I think in a larger perspective, we've talked about high-performing boards. We don't have to do what other boards do. But I think, Bob, what you looked into was good, but was on that one matter. Just saying, we had been talking previously, how do we want to do committee work for the board. This has been a discussion over the last several years, and we never really made a decision. This policy is making us look at it. You know, I'm saying it doesn't appear that we're in a position to make a decision tonight. And that could be something that we could bring up, and maybe everybody could have their thoughts more clear and make a decision.
Well, this is not for action tonight, it's for information. So,
Dr. Edwards, does that make sense?
Yes, I'm just trying to make sure that we do have several policies that still need to be converted from the old system to the new. And I will say, as a superintendent, when anything goes down, my first place is, what does our policy say? Mm-hmm. So I hope I'm misunderstanding, maybe I'm misunderstanding. If we're saying that we're debating whether or not we want to keep policy committees or do something different, I'm nervous about the policy committee part, because from a legal standpoint, whatever's in policy is what governs. Right. So when questions come up, that's going to be my go-to. That should be everybody's go-to first, and I'm trying to make sure that staff even understand that, you know, before you do, just check to see if we have a policy that says, can't we, or govern how we operate. So I do think that that is important for us to keep our eyes on. I will agree with Belle, it can be very time intensive to have 9 people trying to read and wordsmith everything. What was helpful, and Dr. Copeland joined in, having the 2 of you for just this set of policies, and you guys gave me questions that I was like, okay, I can ask Nora that, I can go back, I can do that, I can consider that, and then we decided these are the things we would bring to discussion with the full group. I was not at the instruction and program committee meeting. You guys are on agenda next to discuss, so I'm with you, Mike. Right now, I don't know what Belle is referring to, but I'm eagerly awaiting when it's Ben's turn to do his part to find out what was your discussion, what are your major points, which I think might come through. So I just want to make sure that we're not putting policy review on hold, because we do have some outdated things that might be governing our activities.
I don't think we're saying that. I think our confusion and discussion revolves around these school board committees that we don't have, that are in this. We don't have an instruction committee or an administration and community relations committee. So, but they're in the policy, and I guess we're trying to figure out what that means to this board if they're in this policy.
Gotcha.
And how is it going to work if we're going to keep them in there?
And we may decide to put something else. Somebody may come up with something else. But those committees you just said, I thought I was remarking earlier that I love that, and that's why I was commending you for bringing it up. It might be helpful for a person like me if maybe Denise could just put back out there those 1, 2, 3, 4
committee list.
Yes, ma'am. And who's on it?
Sure.
And what that is, because we don't want to interfere with that. We want that to continue.
Okay.
But this is talking about the school board committee piece itself.
So, Ms. Morrison, if
Yes.
I could offer a potential recommendation, since there's 10 or 12 policies in this agenda item, that specific ones be removed from the policy packet as it's presented. Those can be discussed at a future time, because it might take longer than the next board meeting, and then we can continue to move these policies, because there are several down there that have VSBA updates, and those are really the critical pieces we need to capture.
So the ones that we want to pull would be BCE, and what was the one about special school board meetings?
VDB, the following one.
But I thought I heard a clarity that we want to leave it as it is.
Well, it was changed in this one.
Oh.
So, I mean, the wording was changed. But
I'd say that's a point of clarity amongst the board members, if it's 2 people can call a special meeting or a majority.
I'm just saying, I thought I heard Dr. Nillis, and no one seemed to disagree, that it would be better to leave it as it is, and if it's being abused, then we would come back later. I know we're still debating maybe on the chairperson versus chair, vice chair language. I'm not sure about that part.
So what you're saying is leave item J4 BDB with the old language?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
That's what I heard. I circled it and wrote keep. So I could let Barbara know to, when this comes back up in February, that it should have the original language. And if you want chair instead of chairperson, I didn't get quite.
I don't have a problem with it.
I don't either.
Okay.
Do it. It's fine with
Chair,
me.
that way, to me, and chair and vice chair work.
The equity piece is good, so I think we accomplished that with chair, correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
It should be capital C, vice capital C.
Yes.
Just,
So other than
'cause that's
these,
the title.
yeah, other than the BCE, are there any others?
We had some discussion over quorum, and that got resolved.
That resolved that.
That's resolved, and
So the one that has the most changes is CMA, which is on page
annual report
135.
card, yeah.
Yes.
And that's to match the school quality profiles.
Right. I thought that was good.
That's from VSBA.
Yes. Did anyone have any questions on that one?
Shorter.
Yeah, it's shorter. Maybe make the information easier to understand.
Almost by default.
So if you have any questions, we'll leave that one there, and if you have any questions, direct them to Dr. Edwards. But we're definitely pulling the school board committees. Okay. Okay?
You want this on the work session agenda for January 29th coming up?
That's on my, to ask for what the board wants for that work session. We had some topics left over that we've not gotten to, so I thought we could just spend a couple of minutes developing that work session. All right, J5. Lynchburg City School Board Instruction and Programming Policy Review and Updates.
Good news and bad news. Good news, this is the last agenda item for the night. And bad news is it's another policy agenda item. I would like to start with sharing a little bit of what Ms. Evans is referring to. It's the same process that we have used throughout a lot of the policies. So if you recall a policy book when it comes to you, the way it's formatted and it's laid out when we're doing those big conversions, Ms. Morrison, it's the same process that you and Dr. Sinha experienced when we did the last group of personnel policy. So I am attempting to model that for the other policy groups so that they can see that. I'm also filling in for Ms. Brown this evening as she couldn't be here. So the Instruction and Programming Policy Subcommittee met on December 7th, and they are bringing forward 3 deletions and then the 5 new policies. They kind of line up one for one. So Regulation 6-40 is being replaced by Policy JCJ. Transfers, which is current policy 7-13, is being replaced by JCA, JCA-R, the regulation, and JCB. And then policy 7-51.1 is being replaced by, and stick with me on this one, JHCCA-E. So this is just a progression from old to new, and I'll defer to Ms. Evans if there were any major discussions.
We had that the first meeting, that notebook we did not. So I kind of have notes everywhere. We had very little changes. These were pretty straightforward. The second meeting had a lot more changes. Some of it was just as simple as the wording on the new JHCCA-E. I mean, it was things like down at the bottom where it says 1 part bleach to 9 parts water. We didn't use the word bleach in the disinfected. There were changes like that on these. They were not,
Major?
you know, school board meeting changes. It was all things like that on these. So these were straightforward. What you see crossed out was just little things like that. So these actually should be pretty easy. There were very few changes on these two.
Questions? Comments? Dr. Nellis?
Are these supposed to be 2018 copyright? I'm just, you know, if these are supposed to be updates, I mean, the JHCCA-E is got a 2/05.
I'll double check the copyrights
so,
with
I mean, that might be right.
Ms. Saunders.
Seems a little odd. I guess related to my other comment, you know, it sounds like you're getting VSBA policies with suggested changes, and then they go through the, I guess, policy advisory committee. I'll call it, not a subcommittee, not a board. And then there's additional changes made.
In limited instances.
Potentially.
Yes, sir.
Potentially. I mean, then they could be significant. Just, this is hypothetical. Would it be reasonable to get, so when it comes to the packet, we see what was originally submitted, and then like, here's our subcommittee changes, so that you got sort of a.
Ms. Brown does send that to us, and
But I'm just saying we don't.
Everybody.
You know, so then everybody could see kind of the history.
Certainly.
I don't know. I'm hoping that wouldn't be too big a.
It's not. It would just be a formatting thing to figure out. So the change on JHCCA was actually identified, and we will be pointing it back out to VSBA, that bleach in schools is not supposed to be there. Right. So Mr. Gatsky caught that one at a review of the board agenda last week, and he's the one that recommended appropriate disinfectant. Bleach, we don't use it in schools, so we really don't know how that got in there. So I will sit down with Ms. Saunders and kind of look at how we have approached the editing, because when you get the big policy packets, we print them in color so that you can see the editing that comes recommended from VSBA, and I believe we normally do that in a red. And then if we are changing something that they're recommending, then we'll strike through their red and put our recommended new language in a blue to show the different change. When we've been doing these smaller subsets, we're not, might not be following our own little process. So we'll do a better job of that.
We do. Ours are on Google Docs, so we do them on Google, and then we have a record of kind of changes, so we know what's what.
Right. So these are coming for information tonight,
right.
And I'll check the copyright marks, and if there's anything else, just let me know.
Right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Closes the new business. Now we move on to the superintendent's comments.
All right. First, both of our personnel and parent advisory committees met in December, and it's always a pleasure to meet with both parents or family members and our personnel. Some of the normal things came up at personnel, professional development, some questions about facilities, always questions about salary that came up. Parent advisory group, one of the things that we talked about, we did a lot of family and community engagement conversations. The one thing in particular with the school PTOs and trying to have a way where maybe PTO groups can meet together. Often you'll see we're having sub night here or support us there, and there may be some overlap. And you know, we talked about perhaps having a different group of just those leaders that meet with me or me and Ethel or team, and then they can share what they're doing across buildings. Part of that is we have some schools that have very strong PTOs and some that don't, and maybe there could be a little adoption and some help across the school division. So I thought that was a really good idea that we would like to entertain, and thank the parents for bringing that to my attention. It's also, I can't believe that we met like early December. It seems like I have a large list of things that have happened. So I'll just hit a few of them. One, I got to attend the Stubant's Scholarship Award for Heritage High School student Adam Palmer, in December, and that was just tremendous to be a part of that. Having that student get a large scholarship of $13,000 and not having him know that until he got to the ceremony, and just to watch his face as this was being awarded to him was very, very priceless. In terms of that, I have been having my Give Me 30 meetings with all of my small group building principals, and through that and through our principals meetings, we have received a lot of feedback about various items, calendar included. So some of that you'll see from there. Mayor's Youth Council had their holiday reception at Mary Jane Dolan's house. They are also going to have a breakfast coming up soon, so it's nice to be a part of that as well. We talked a little bit about the delegate assembly in our meeting that we had. We hosted the Region 5 Superintendent meeting here at EC Glass, so lots of information across the region about what other school divisions are doing and how they're meeting the challenges, particularly when we, at that point, I think we were just getting around to the 5% and what school divisions were doing in terms of meeting that challenge. Last day before winter break, we took a field trip to schools and just really hung out with children, which was really nice to have that opportunity. Sometimes I have so many meetings, I never see kids, so it's great to be able to get out and actually see kids. Came back in December. I talked to you a little bit about my January 2nd meeting with the city manager's office. I also met with several interfaith leaders. I'm at an interfaith meeting, which was very nice and productive. We have a lot of people who just want to help. Invited them to come to our community conversation, which I want to give a huge thank you to my entire team and all of the facilitators who ran those sessions on Thursday night. And I am just going to say, I did not tell a single person what they had to do, how to do it. So whatever your experience was truly that team, that group came up with those activities and that level of engagement. All I did was just plant the vision in terms of this is where we want to take people. So that should just tell you the phenomenal administrative team and teachers, support staff that we have, that they could put that together in relatively a short amount of time, given that I've done this before and we've taken upwards to a year to really plan it. So kudos to all of you. And we guessed on attendance. We didn't know how many people would come. This was our first one. So some rooms were packed, and you had some of our facilitators, they were just moving on the spot. We're going to do something different here because of the pack. We used the hallways to do some things, but the feedback that I got was very, very positive, and we have a lot more work to do now. Lots of helpful information, charts, tables, email, and the like. But I do want to thank my staff for the tremendous job. This would not have been successful if it wasn't for the level of dedication and teamwork. And hopefully you got to know we had a little bit of everybody there, assistant principals, principals, supervisors, directors, each with little silent roles in those meetings to help out. So kudos to them. And thank you all for those of you who were able to participate and come out and spend the evening with us. You took a gamble on what a community conversation would actually look like, and we really wanted to have a conversation. So I am grateful for that. I will also say that our community survey, is that still open, Ethel, or did we close it? It ended on Friday. Okay, so we'll get some feedback from that as well. And I have a couple upcoming engagements. On Sunday, I'll be at White Rock Church for their community engagement and legacy for MLK. Looking forward to that. And then on Monday, the Lynchburg MLK Community Council is also having their breakfast, and it's going to be the keynote for a legacy of dignity and worth. So a little bit busy over the weekend. And this Friday, I will be going to Roanoke on behalf of Virginia Tech. We have an aspiring superintendent's program. We actually have folks in our aspiring superintendent's program. And I will be giving a talk on, or 10-minute talk on superintendent board relations. So thank you for giving me lots of food and fodder for a wonderful dialogue on how to establish positive working relationships and get to that high-performing board. So just want to thank you and thank everybody for all of that. And most importantly, thank you to the community, all of whom came out to support us. I was very pleased with the turnout and just the level of engagement and willingness, open-mindedness. And we have some people that want to work, so we are geared up, ready to go and do some fabulous things for kids. So.
And I enjoyed the food.
Oh, yes, let me thank the students for making our dinner. And we also had babysitting, and Cindy Babb organized all of that. Our Heritage High School culinary students made those wonderful meals that you had. Was it EC Class or Heritage? Combined. Oh, combined. Okay, combined. That made those wonderful meals, and I actually didn't get a box that night because you didn't get one either. But I heard they were great, and something about the chicken salad. Was that the
really
the one? So thanks to the students who did a fantastic job too.
Okay, thank you. We need to do two things, board comments, but we also need to decide on our topics for the work session. And do you want to do that before we go into board comments? We have some left over. We added one tonight about the board committees. We had the MOU, the understanding with the police that we...
And we have not, I mean, outside of, we're getting updated signatures, and I think we're going to add the body cam piece to that, but we haven't.
So that's not,
yeah,
that's
we haven't
not ready
officially
yet.
Connected with the very busy chief of police.
We had a mention of maybe a technology session for board members so that we can learn how to find board policies on the computers instead of having to search for them.
Yeah. So one of the things that I would love for you to do is bring your device to the work session so that whether you're on an iPad or a Chromebook, how do you get to these things quickly, particularly where community is getting information from school quality reports, and some of that you can get quick and easy yourself. I know April's told me a couple tools where you could just drill down and get information off the state website regarding that, and our community know how to do it, and I'd love from our board to also know how to do that, and that should be a quickie thing.
I've also had one.
I was also going to say about the attendance policy at the high schools. We still haven't dealt with that one.
Okay. The attendance policy. And I also had a request to look at personnel, the number of teachers and employees that we are retaining, the number that are leaving, looking at different areas and different content areas or different specialties as to whether or not start looking at this information now. If that's an interest, and I think it's something that we should be looking at. Dr. Gupta?
I was going to make a comment on it, but I think we need to develop a serious timeline for reducing the achievement gaps in our school system. Not just random number, today is 73, tomorrow is 72. I'd like to see a focused effort that by December we'll be at this level, by March we'll be at this level. A timeline for reducing the gap between the black and white students. So how to achieve that could be part of the work session. The strategies, the resources we need. What could we do as a school system? Because we had a presenter in November meeting, and he said nothing has been done. He's been coming for 3 years, and that's not good.
Okay.
So Dr. Gupta beat me on that one, but we talked about that whole issue that they really wanted to have the next work session to be on the achievement gap. And I think since we had a high priority for the fall, for the staff and for the schedules, and our next really big one, I think the board is interested in is the achievement gap. It'd be nice to have that on the agenda for the work session.
All right, so that's too many topics. We need to narrow it down to 4 if we're going to be able to have some serious discussion and commitment of time to it. Do you want me to send you the topics and you send me back
Sure.
your top 4?
Sure.
I'll do that tomorrow morning. Does that work? And if you have any other suggestions, I have board committees, technology, employee status, kind of like an in and out report, the attendance policy, and timeline for reducing achievement gap.
Well, I don't know if attendance policy has to be on there. We just have to, at some point, address that we're not all
on the same page.
LCS policy.
But attendance really impacts achievement, so that
Right.
kind of really plays into that well. Yes.
I just want to ask Dr. Gupta, because I want to be responsive to your time. When you say you want the timeline for the reducing of the achievement gap.
So like say the goal for 2019 is to reduce, suppose the gap is 14 points. I'm just randomly picking up a number. So for 2019, the goal is to reduce it to 10 points.
Okay.
Or 9 points. You know, based on the resources we have, and we decide a goal for 2019, a goal for 2020.
Okay.
So end of the year we can assess where we are with it. You know,
Okay.
instead of just saying we have 70 and 84 or 71 and 83, and just presenting the numbers. Have we achieved? Do we have a target to achieve?
Okay, so what I would suggest with that, because this is going to be in 2 weeks, and if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying by March you want incremental goals, which are not using SOL. Normally our conversation in public is about SOL test scores, which is a once a year mark. So you're looking for what are some ongoing progress monitoring pieces that we have in place where we can look at student performance over maybe 9 weeks or so on and so forth. And to do that, that's the part of the work that we're actually doing with the strategic plan right now, and looking across, just pick a grade, 4th grade, looking across 4th grade. What assessments are given across 4th grade that are common assessments that we could do exactly what you're talking about in terms of looking at the performance for black students, white students, and so on.
These are smaller inputs. End of the day, it's the SOL. So
right, but I wouldn't have, like, if you said, how is the SOL score doing in March? I'd be like, I don't know, we didn't test yet.
Whenever the SOL scores come, we set a target for achievement, and then as you develop the strategic plan, you're working towards that goal.
Those targets, isn't that already in the comprehensive plan, though the SOL targets are?
Each school has one as well.
Okay.
School improvement plan with those targets.
Okay, so
specific targets?
Specific targets, yes.
So it might be sharing that information, but that's not the first thing I heard you say was the smaller timeline.
End of the day, it will require all those 9 weeks, 6 weeks work to take it to where you want to be. But once we have a target set, then our energies will be directed towards that target. And Madam, someday we would like to bring that discussion back on living wages back on the table. You know, I know Dr. Edwards decided not to discuss it this time or took it out from the agenda, but
I just ran out of money.
I know, but
don't let the record show that I just took it out. There was a money issue.
The point is that there are priorities. You can take it out from the top and give it to the bottom, or give it everybody the same amount. You know, so where our priorities are, a discussion of living wages and how much will it cost to the school system to provide living wages.
Okay, I will put these topics out, and you can let me know, and I'll let you know what the top 4 are. Do that tomorrow morning. Board comments?
I'll just say at the community conversation, I was impressed with the turnout, and it was clear staff were the turnout was so good, staff was having to adjust on the fly, and they did. They were flexible, and for the most part, at least the people that I was with, were open and agreeable to having to shift around, and I thought it was a good event. My experience.
Mine too. Dr. Gupta?
I agree with him. I attended a session on special education, very well managed. And, even the questions were answered in a very detailed manner. So thank you.
Any other board comments? Dr. Brennan?
Also reiterate just thanks to Dr. Edwards and her staff for that great program last week. And I know it's the beginning of what will continue in the future. And a couple other quick thanks, as we haven't met in a little while. I wanted to thank One Community and One Voice for the donation of the bicycles to the students at Perrymont to encourage them for academic success. I thought that was great. I'd like to thank the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities for a recent program on prejudice awareness that was done for middle schools both in Lynchburg and surrounding counties, which is something that the students and we as adults could all benefit from, that was a great program. I'd like to thank Mrs. Kelly at Heritage High School, allowed me to be the educator for the day last week in her college biology class to talk about viruses for 2 hours, which was a scary thing for the students and for me, but we've all survived. And then lastly, I'd like to thank Dr. Coleman, because back in December, more than a month ago, we went to Richmond to do the March for More, which was a great experience, and Dr. Coleman was such a keynote speaker, and that was such a great representative of our district. And I was very impressed how the mayor of Richmond, the superintendent of Richmond, the school board chairman were so pleased to have a district other than Richmond represented there, that I think it really was a worthwhile trip, and thank you, Dr. Coleman, for bringing me along.
You the one that, thank you.
All right, any other comments?
I would like to acknowledge that this coming Thursday, I'll be meeting with Dr. Hahn, the Executive Director of Virginia High School League, as a member of that board now, and I would like to ongoingly know how I can share some things that could be helpful that would benefit our particular division. Also, as the chair may recognize, the Capitol Conference has been rescheduled due to the governor's state of emergency, and it appears that we may or may not have anybody attending. I don't know. I know I'll be going. Please put on your calendar March the 18th. That's going to be our spring networking session, and we're going to be at Liberty Middle School right in Bedford, which is the brand new school there, and that's going to really shape up to be powerful. I think I have it right. Knowledge, accountability, and courage. Is that right, Dr. Edwards? I am so proud of and concur with everyone that has been said. I just want to say these closing statements around that. Today is January the 15th, and of course, this is the 90th birthday of Dr. King, and I want to say happy 90th birthday, Dr. King. I want to say that we must let him grow up from a 33-year-old dreamer to a 39-year-old who challenged the nation to deal seriously with poverty, to a 90-year-old who is wondering why we are still dreaming without the corresponding action to dismantle the systems that produce poverty in our nation. I also want to underscore that this year is a wonderful year for Virginia, 400 years since 1619. After the arrival of Africans to this land to be known as America, and with the treatment of women, Virginia must lead the way on resolving the race, gender, and economic issues in our country, in particular and around the world. To that end, Madam Chair, I'm proud of our meeting tonight, but we're going to also have to have the courage to recognize that this board can meet with whomever this board wants to meet with a majority of the board. Engaging our community is going to be critical to solving many of these problems that we are addressing. If we're going to have the achievement gap or anything like it in a work session, we have promised the community that they're going to see results, and together we can make that difference. And so on this historic day, I leave that challenge and call for courage from our board.
And with that, we have a school board meeting on Tuesday, February the 5th, 2019 at 5:30, and a work session on Tuesday, January 29th at 5 p.m. in the board. This meeting is adjourned.